Welcome to Bizarre Podcast.
Imagine the following. It's been a long day. The sun has set and the night time arrives. You're starting to feel your eyes become heavy and you decide it's time for bed. You slip between the sheets and slowly drift into a deep sleep. Hours later you awake in the dead of night and open your eyes. You try to move but you can't. Your body won't respond. You feel paralysed. You feel a weight on top of your chest, choking the breath out of you. Then you realise you're not entirely alone. Your heart starts to beat hard in your chest as you lie there helpless. And then you see it, stepping out of the shadows of the room, a shadow figure. You try in vain to move but you can't. Then the figure draws closer and closer. You're petrified, but you can't scream. You can't move, and you can't take your eyes off it. Eventually it makes its way over to your bed, and bends down until it's face to face with you. There's an intense noise like 1,000 voices all speaking at once in a language you don't understand. You feel its breath upon your face, and somehow you find the strength to close your eyelids. The horrendous sounds drift away into nothingness. You feel your limbs come back to life. You reopen your eyes to find that you are awake. There's no one with you, and the room is as it should be. You're all alone, and the prospects of falling back to sleep tonight is very, very slim. Well, that all sounds like the plot of a horror movie, doesn't it? But it's not. It's been medically explained as something called sleep paralysis. But what if I was to tell you that millions of people all over the world in many different cultures have experienced this sleep paralysis and have all been visited by the exact same entities, the shadow people? On today's episode we will be diving a little deeper into the subject and hear first-hand experiences from some of our listeners, including a terrifying listener's personal recording at the end of the show involving the Hat Man. I will also be trying to shed a little light into what sleep paralysis actually is, how it's caused, and how you could possibly prevent it in the future. But in between I'll be reading out a few of our listeners' experiences with sleep paralysis. And without further ado, here is our first story, which was sent in by James, who didn't leave his last name, but you know who you are. I was a child at the time, only 11 years old. I had had a few bad experiences with sleep paralysis when I slept alone in my bedroom. I was afraid to sleep alone afterwards and begged my parents to allow me to sleep in their room. My father dragged my mattress and sheets into my parents' bedroom and placed it just at the side of his bed, where I would sleep. They allowed me to keep the hallway light on, and with the door closed only halfway, a sliver of light would break into the room. My father would hold my hand until I eventually fell asleep. Later that night, I awoke, but I couldn't move a limb. My body felt dead, my voice had been taken from me, and only my eyes were able to move freely. I looked to my right to see my father's hand still hanging from the bed as he lay fast asleep. I tried to speak, but no sound came out. That's when the feeling of dread came over me. I suddenly became very afraid. My heart pounded in my chest, and then I saw it. In the corner of the room where the shadow was thick, but still I could make out the shape of a man. It seems darker than the shadow surrounding it. It came forward from the shadow, slightly, and just stood there staring for what seemed like an eternity. I looked again at my father's hand, and inside I screamed, urging my hand to just reach out and grab him, but I couldn't. I glanced back over and the shadow figure drew closer. My whole body seemed to get heavier as it approached. I glanced back at my father's hand, and then back at the figure, who was now directly over me, breathing on my face. Then I awoke, screaming, and trying as hard as I could to catch my breath. Other nights the shadow figure would return. Some nights I'd awake on my side and could not see the figure, but only hear whispering in my ear, and words that I did not understand. On another occasion I was away for a few nights on a school trip in Anglesey in the UK. On my first night I awoke in a room full of school friends who were sound asleep. But as usual, I couldn't move or speak, and the fear began to take over me. From where I lay, I could see the open doorway, and very slowly, the shadow figure began to peek its head around the frame. But this time it was different. Its head seemed to be lower down on its body, as if its shoulders were somehow higher than the head. As it came into the room in full view, I could see why. The shadow figure's body was terribly deformed and twisted. Its head seemed to be lower than its shoulders, and its arms and legs were bent in unnatural ways. It hobbled and stumbled its way over to me. Again, I couldn't scream or alert my classmates. I was helpless as it approached, and my heart beat out of its chest. The best way I can describe its movements was it seemed to move like an old stop-motion film, jittery and clingy. And then luckily I awoke and held in my cry. I went to find a teacher who sat with me for the rest of the night until morning came. I don't tend to have as many experiences as I did when I was a child, but every night when I lay my head down on my pillow, I wonder, is tonight the night when the shadow figure returns? Now, before the next listener story, let's discuss what sleep paralysis is from a scientific medical view. When you fall asleep, your mind and body enter 4 different stages of sleep. Stage 1 is where you first close your eyes and drift off. At this point, it's very easy to wake you up. In stage 2, you enter light sleep. Your body temperature drops and your heart rate slows. You are now falling into deep sleep. Stage 3, you have now entered a deep sleep. It's now harder to awake you, and if you were, you would be slightly disorientated. And then stage 4, after about 90 minutes after falling asleep, you enter REM sleep, which stands for rapid eye movement. Your first cycle of REM sleep lasts about 10 minutes. Each other REM cycle gets a little longer, until you reach your last cycle, which then lasts about an hour. It's in this hour that your heart rate and breathing quicken as your brain becomes more active, causing you to have more intense dreams. And because of this, the mind shuts down the body, temporarily paralysing you. This is to keep you safe from thrashing out in your sleep or rolling out of bed and injuring yourself. And this is generally when sleep paralysis can take place. You awake from your sleep, but for some reason your body does not, due to you still being in your REM stage of sleep, which can cause an uncontrollable fear and influence hallucinations to take place, which is one explanation for the shadow figures that appear in your room. During an episode of sleep paralysis, you may find it difficult to take deep breaths, as if your chest is being crushed or restricted. You may be able to move your eyes, but some people also find that they cannot. You may also have the sensation that someone or something is in the room with you, and many feel that this presence wishes them harm, causing you to feel very, very frightened. Well, that's a scientific explanation, but many believe there's another explanation, a more supernatural explanation, regarding the shadow people, the Hat Man, or the old hag, or even doppelgangers of your own family, which is what happened to the next listener in his story. So, I've been dealing with sleep paralysis since I was 14, about 15 years now, and I've had thousands of horrifying episodes. There's one particular I'd like to share with you all. So in 2010 I met this girl, a beautiful woman, who is now my wife. We hit it off, and by late 2011 we were living together in a small apartment in town. She was aware of the condition in which I deal with, and I'm sure she thought I was crazy, but it never really seemed to bother her. So we've been living together for a couple of months now, and I hadn't experienced sleep paralysis for quite a long time. I'd say maybe a month or so. And I wake up one morning unable to move. No biggie, this is nothing new. So I lay in bed next to my wife, who woke up at the same time as me, and she held my hand and smiled at me. I assumed she had not a clue I was paralysed at the moment, but I thought to myself, I'll snap out of this soon enough. And that's when I realised something was wrong, way wrong. Something way darker was going on here than I originally thought. Because beyond my wife, I could see through the hallway into the bathroom, and in the bathroom I could see my wife doing her hair, getting ready for the day. Which one was really my wife? That's when the one laying next to me began to dig into my hand with her nails, as they turned into claws. The smile on her face grew bigger and bigger to the point it consumed almost all of her face, and her eyes became hollow and black. Now at this moment I'm freaking the hell out, like I've dealt with similar things before, but what in the living fuck? So as her smile takes over her face, I begin to feel fingers coming out of my bed, tickling my legs and then trying to hold them down and pull me into the bed. I fought, damn did I fight. And I came out of it, like always, the champion. This one though really messed with me. It fucked with my head, to be honest. And to this day, it still gives me chills thinking about what happened. Sleep paralysis can be linked with the following: stress and anxiety, drug or alcohol abuse, and sleep apnea are just some of the suggested triggers. But some people don't buy into this. Some people believe that it's linked to the supernatural. Some people believe that there are actual beings visiting them in the night. And when you start to delve into the different experiences that have been documented throughout the years, it's easy to understand why. The visitations are very similar from person to person. Millions of people around the world have witnessed the same entities appearing in their room in the dead of night, which all seem to act in a similar way. Here are a few of the more popular ones. The first one is the shadow person, who is said to visit you alone or in groups of 3. He can usually be seen standing at the foot of your bed, watching, and moving closer, slowly until he is standing over you as you lie defenceless. Some have been said to have burning red eyes which induce more fear than the others, and can grow even larger the more afraid you become. And then there is a hooded shadow figure who is said to just radiate pure hatred and loathing towards you. The second can be described as an old hag. Many around the world have told the same story of this foul looking old woman with putrid skin, long unkept hair and long sharp fingernails. As sleep paralysis takes over your body, she will climb up onto your chest and wrap her long cold fingers around your throat and start to throttle you as you lay helpless, all the time laughing into your face. The entities can also be heard and not seen. Some people have had sleep paralysis where they are not able to open their eyes, but they are fully aware of their surroundings. When the fear of not being able to move or see starts to take over them, they start to hear certain noises, like knocking on doors, or the slamming and shutting of doors, a high-pitched static noise in their ear, the sound of footsteps on the floor, as unseen entities run around your bed, and speak threatening words into your ear as you lie helpless, gasping for a breath due to the pressure which is being forced down upon your chest. And finally, probably the most famous of the entities, the Hat Man. The Hat Man generally just stands in the doorway of your bedroom, looking at you with interest, but usually not bothering you as much as the others. He just stands and observes, though he is just as terrifying. Sometimes he is accompanied by other shadow figures, and he always seems to be in charge. He has also been related to Ouija boards and alien visitations. If you're unlucky enough to be visited by the Hat Man, you will notice by his silhouette that he seems to be wearing a fedora, a top hat, or an old-style western hat, with a long black duster coat. And this description of the Hat Man, as well as the shadow figures and the old hag, have all been seen by millions of different people all over the world, and the awful terrifying experiences always seem to be the same. And this helps to keep the unnerving theory that there may be more to this than meets the eye. Although not all sleep paralysis experiences involve the shadow people. Sometimes instead of being terrifying, they can be just creepy and weird, like the next listener story, about a visit from an elderly woman holding a lantern. I'm sleeping on my couch in the upstairs living room when the old woman with the lantern comes through the basement door, which leads to the floor I'm sleeping on. I see her enter through the door with her old world lantern, complete with deep orange glow. She kind of gets startled when she notices that I've spotted her. She then says something along the lines of, "Oh, it's nothing," and that she just needs to get something from the kitchen. Cooking, bacon related, I couldn't decipher. I think nothing of it. And then I realise it's 3 AM in the morning, and I can't move. I ask her if she can only help me up. I can help her find whatever it is she needs from the kitchen. She looks at me and says of course. She walks over and places her hand on my shoulder and brings me to my feet. All of a sudden I snap awake. I'm lying on my couch, and the old lady is gone. But at least she was nice enough to close the door behind her before she left, because I know for a fact that it was wide open when I fell asleep.